was moved back. Yes. First question for Dr. Nabil Ba'i. For marriages on the rocks between courts in crisis, what are the most important and effective changes we can make to save our marriage?
Yeah, I said at the end of my presentation, of course the situation, the first answer, it depends. If it's an extramarital affair, which is so common, we have to deal with it first. It's a waste of time to try with a couple while there's a third party. If there is no third party and the two, they just lost the desire to continue, then this is the program which I call SEATS, which takes 6 months behavior exercises for them to rekindle again the flame of their holy love. And it includes exercises for spiritual intimacy, for positive communication, for emotional expression, for showing tenderness, and proper holy sexuality. But it is very important to exclude first psycho-emotional disorder, psychiatric disorder, personality disorder, addiction problem, any kind of addiction, extramarital affair, including midlife crisis. Then if the two are just bored, then we'll work on them for satisfying their needs and that program.
Thank you, Dr. Nabil. ناخد another question so we can alternate. Question also, Dr. Nabil Ba'i. Why do you hate the book 5 Languages of Love?
No, I don't hate it, but it is widely spread with no biblical basis. There are languages, I mentioned some languages in the Bible about love. Maybe affection is one of the languages mentioned in those 5 languages of love. And our church, they have different, our Bible, different languages. I mentioned some of them. I don't think they mention in that Bible ministry of washing the feet. I don't think so. It's one of the most effective language of love. And there are other languages we could search for it in the Bible. But it's like that book, Men are from Mars. It is rubbish. It's rubbish, totally rubbish. Especially if you go to some extension of it. There are some books about sexuality which is total pornography. So we have to be very careful on reading books in our churches. I mean, the one in charge of giving certain books to be read about Christian family, there are books about Christian family in the market. We have to be very careful about it. And the book, a very old book, which could be elaborated more about his need, her need, it could be more elaborated. And it could be studied in groups. We need in our churches these days, because as I told you, the main dilemma is unholiness in the family. Unholiness in the family. We need purity groups. I wish I cannot dream by having the 12-step program in our church about sex addiction. It's hard to find a family now without a boy or a girl or a man or a woman who are not sex addicts. انت مش مقدرين اللي بيحصل يعني. It's so hard. So we need purity groups, as some of the American churches, they have it now. Why not in our church we start purity groups? Men alone and females alone. Because we never treat sex addiction with two genders are there. يعني, according to a meeting between the bishops here in Los Angeles, of all the denominations, they were asking what is the major problem. They found it unholiness, extramarital affairs, adultery, fornication. So we have to focus on this in our churches and rebuild the family again on holiness.
Okay, is this on? I have a question. Whenever there is an issue with my daughter-in-law, she doesn't like, then she goes to my own daughter or my son, her husband, and shares that instead of coming to me. How should I approach this? Talk to her. Definitely, there's something wrong with the communication. Talk to her and say, I want to be open, or I want to be able to communicate with you, so let's talk together. Maybe also the way that you respond to her makes her afraid to come and talk to you. So look at the way you react when she talks to you, or find out what the issues are and work on them on yourself. Go to someone else or another question. I'll go to another question. I've been married for 2 years, and I feel that my husband is so close to his parents that he gives me that feeling that I'm not at all close to him as they are. What's your advice? Again, that's a big problem because you don't have enough courage to talk to your husband about how he is relating to you. The closeness between you and your husband is very important. Everybody else had talked about that too. So talk about that with your husband on a one-on-one basis and see why he doesn't feel like he could be close to you and why he's so close to his parents even after marriage. There's something wrong that he feels like he has to go to his parents for everything instead of going to you.
I have 2 questions here, and then we'll give the microphone to Dr. Yusri. Is it okay to spank your kids? This can be a different lecture by itself. It is okay to spank the kids at a certain age for a certain purpose in a certain style. The age is maybe 1.5 or 2 years till 6. After 6, we don't recommend spanking. Use spanking as rarely as possible. There are other ways of punishing if you feel the behavior is continuing, like time out or taking privileges away, like watching TV or playing a game. Number 3, the spanking is to correct a certain behavior that we talked about, we spoken about it, we opened a discussion about, and I'm not seeing any improvement. Okay? And the spanking is wrong if I am doing it out of anger. If I'm not in control while I'm doing the spanking is wrong. So, the spanking is for a certain age. I can't spank my 17-year-old boy. That's just an insult to him and to me. A 16-year-old girl, a fully developed woman, something is wrong in the family. Okay? Number 2, it is for a certain purpose which I don't approve of the behavior. I don't have to attack the personality, call him or her names, but the behavior that I don't approve is blank blank. Number 3, I am in control of my feelings and I know what I am doing. Some parents, they think I just the child, I just give it to him, that's spank. That's not spank. You know, in our life, maybe I spanked one of our girls once in 40 years of child raising. So spanking, because sometimes you go to the other extreme and you hear all the California laws of child abuse, blah 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 blah. I spank with the extended hand. I don't leave any marks on a soft tissue like behind or the hand, not using a stick or a belt or a rod of iron. The rod of iron verse that people circulate does not exist in the Bible. It is not in the book of Proverbs. people say to each other, it does not exist. Dr. Nabil.
Most of the questions that I received are about asking me answers for the questions in your handout. Okay? And I think answering these questions may need another presentation. But let me summarize that because we learned a lot from Dr. Nabil in his talk about affection. Avoiding mistakes, common mistakes in our sexual relationship within marriage. Judging each other, labeling each other, demeaning each other, downplaying each other's needs, physical needs. And that cannot be achieved simply by just not doing that. It needs first being in touch with your feeling, especially with you as a husband. You know why? Because marriage has been assembled and instituted to follow an example. It's Christ and the church. What happened? Christ loved us first. We love him because he loved us first. And once a man demonstrates and shows love to his wife, affection, continuously, without any selfishness, getting rid of our narcissism, then what happens? What happened to the church when she saw Christ loving her? Up to death, even to death. The church bowed down, worshipped him, followed him. That's why, this is the system that we follow. It's not wife who seeks a husband. You know, it's not a girl. It's me. It's the man who's looking for a wife to marry. Right? But just ignoring my wife's needs, the entire family will suffer. For example, other stuff like sometimes we feel shy of communicating our sexual needs. Okay? We need to focus on little things like non-verbal communication, body language. When you see your wife is dressed in one way or another, you don't need just to ask her, embarrass her sometimes. You need to be sensitive to her gestures. And your wife, the same thing. You don't have just to do like the example that I mentioned during my presentation early this morning. You need just to submit and to be sensitive to your husband's needs. The details of, there are so many aspects about how far we can go in the relationship. Many questions came about oral sex and all that stuff. And I like to say, when you close your master bedroom, you are just one flesh. Nobody is allowed to get into your master bedroom. It's nobody's business. With all respect to all parties, and you understand what I mean. Many of us just feel guilty after having sex. It's not normal. Some of us may go and confess, and they tell us that. Why? What happens between you and your spouse, it's between you and your spouse. We don't care. All what we care that it's an utmost expression of love between both of you, becoming one flesh according to God's plan and design for our life. The details I'm ready to answer any question in details. Maybe I prefer just to have it personally in the form of an email, and you got my email or phone call. But I promise you, because I'm sure that this can take us so much time. But let me pass the mic to other speakers.
I have some questions for Dr. Nabil Bey. I do not know what to do. I'm a wife giving up on my marriage. I tell my husband exactly what I want in every way and how he can help me, how he can love me, how etc. I don't ask for much, but it seems that he never listens, and I'm tired of him taking me for granted.
And for that poor lady, you are not alone. You are not alone in that boat. Be sure of that. There are two ways. I don't know whether your husband was raised in a family in which he was trained to satisfy your needs in certain areas, especially in the affectionate area. And I add to these days also in the passionate area. And a long time ago I didn't understand verse 1 Corinthians 7:4, in which they were saying, wife, you don't have authority over your own body. And I was wondering why the completion of that verse, and husband, you don't have authority over your own body but for your wife. Because in the previous days, the completion of that verse was not seen before, but it's seen these days. As I'm saying, those who are involved with computers so much, seeing unholy websites, they reach what we call emotional deadness. Emotional deadness. Total insensitivity to the needs of their wives. So if a case like this, I have to exclude first that this man did not clean himself up from a previous life with pornography, because maybe he has stopped the computer, but what is in his mind is still there, still using it. Any man who is totally insensitive to the needs and feelings of his wife, although that lady, that question, she is telling him what she needs. Others are shy to say that, but she's telling him, and he's insensitive for that. I have to exclude. This is pathognomonic, diagnostic. If that person is totally insensitive to that extent, which means emotionally dead, I have to exclude that he was living before on pornography and his mind is still full of that. And there's a program for treatment of that. There's help for that. Number two, till this will happen, I mentioned in the first part of my presentation about affection between Christ and you. So you are not alone. Christ is there with you. Christ is with you in that family. Because if you don't use that particular part, relationship with your heavenly bridegroom, I'm afraid you might be tempted outside by someone who could satisfy your emotional needs or other needs. So everybody is vulnerable. Everybody in life is vulnerable. And for the man who is insensitive to the needs of his wife, God would judge him, because he might be a reason for her to be seduced by somebody outside. And I'm saying nobody is immune. Nobody is infallible. So it's a responsibility for the man who is not satisfying the needs of his wife, including conversation with her, even talking with her. Because the main two needs, as all of you know, is affection and conversation, verbal communication, needs for the wife. And a precaution for those who have their men insensitive to their needs, they have to talk to their father of confession. Father of confession of the man, if he has a father of confession. And to tell them that, and tell them what I have said right now, to exclude whether he was on pornography before or not. It is very widespread. Very widespread. I'm saying extremely, between servants, different levels of servants. And the outcome, the consequences are usually showing on the marital relationship in the area of satisfying the needs, all different needs. Any good stuff?
I have another question for you. Another question for Dr. Nabil Bey. What is the best way to reconnect with your spouse when you're both busy with work and kids and time spent together ends in arguments?
There has to be at least 1 hour daily. At least. You have to get 1 hour daily. And our Egyptian community, we don't believe in the so-called companionship. We don't believe in it. We are like Indian movies. We are so into raising kids, taking care of the kids. Nothing wrong in that. But the mystery is between the man and his wife. There is no mystery of the church. One of the 7 sacraments, one of them is not children. So God will ask even the priest of the church, if he will not take care of his family before the congregation. So companionship must not be lost from the beginning of the marriage till end of the marriage. And companionship means spending good time, leisure time, between the husband and the wife alone without the children. You have to find time to go out in any activity which is enjoyable by the two partners, away from the kids. Kids are not there. And usually in the tests, when I give a test for any course given in the seminaries, I put that question. Going out, a husband and wife and the kids, do you regard this companionship or not? It's not companionship. Companionship means no kids. It's time for the two together. So, after the kids will sleep, and they have sleep at a certain time, there must be at least 1 hour a day, communication between the two spouses. Could be part of it Bible reading, could be prayer, could be showing some affection to one another. Until now, Bible reading or spiritual intimacy or affection could be in the presence of the kids. Other than that, it's inside the bedroom. And inside the bedroom, kids are not allowed to go in, but anything outside the bedroom could be seen by the kids. So there has to be time allocated. And time in our busy schedule, there has to be. And the American Association of Christian Counselors now are specifically saying that we have to allocate time between the two spouses every day, and even we have to schedule time during the week on the calendar for passionate lovemaking. We don't leave it for spontaneous. Our spontaneity, our needs, when it comes, it will never come these days. So everything in our busy schedule must be scheduled, including 1 hour a day. But please don't use this 1 hour to discuss the bills or discuss something negative, which raises more conflicts. God bless you.
I have another question for you.
For me?
Yes. Why do I have to get permission to make love before going to church or when I'm fasting? Although, can't read that part. This makes conflict with me because I do something bad, and you don't give clear answers about the question of oral sex.
I think he's a man. Yeah, by experience, yeah. Okay. The church did not say at all that in marital relationship, holy marital relationship, love making is unholy. Actually, St. John Chrysostom mentioned it is thoroughly pure. Thoroughly pure. But why the church is saying after midnight, before going to the liturgy, take communion, you stop eating, drinking? Why you are specifically talking about love making and you forgot about eating and drinking? So eating, drinking, or the biological processes will stop it in preparation for the holiest of the holiest to come to you. You are going to receive a real body and real blood. So it's not because the relationship is unholy. No. Because we make ourselves ready by fasting all our systems, including your mind, including our minds, from thinking about anything bad or else you need to confess to. So we need to live from midnight in a very holy situation, praying, fasting all our systems in the body, waiting for the most holy to come in, to come to the garden enclosed. This is regarding the first part of the question. Why you didn't get a clear answer about oral sex? Are there any kids here?
No.
Okay. Anybody less than 18?
No.
Okay. Yes, the church is specifically saying that vaginal sex is the plan of God. Vaginal sex is the plan of God set for us. If you review the anatomy, physiology, biology of the systems, you will find these areas, the genital area for the male and female, God has engineered it, and this only has been engineered to fulfill the purpose of God, including enjoyment of the relationship by the nerve supply of that area. No other area in the body could lead to both of them enjoying that relationship. Oral sex could be either in the mouth, a man using his organ in the mouth, and sometimes the church, during personal communication between the priest and the man, if the woman is not disgusted, if the woman has no objection to help the man to get aroused because he is impotent or about to be impotent, if this might help him to start getting erected, and then he will continue or finish by vaginal sex, some priests allow that to happen. But it is no to ejaculate in the mouth. Because this is not the place God has created for ejaculation. And the same, the male organ is only allowed to penetrate the vagina and no other orifice in the body, because it's the place God has engineered it to be. So if the woman is disgusted even by licking the organ, then the commandment and the commitment, we are not after satisfying our needs, but every spouse is looking for the needs of the other spouse before his own. If a man will see his wife disgusted and she can't, he have no right to impose on her by law, by civil law, to do any sexual act. By law, by civil law. And spiritually, if they are really in love, he can't impose on her to do something which she doesn't like to do. And regarding the other part of the oral sex, a man is not allowed to intrude into the vagina by anything else other than his organ, male organ. I think this is enough for that oral sex. I don't think anybody have elaborated like that before.
I think that was something. Who wants to take it? Go ahead.
Two small questions, and then we'll give the microphone to Dr. Yusri. There is a question here about a parent pinching the child's cheeks, okay, like playing with the child, and the child is disgusted with that. I think our measurement, our indicator is the acceptance of the child. I did this mistake many years ago. Not this mistake, similar mistake. I was new in the country, and we had a relative who had a hyperactive boy, like a 5-year-old boy, who can بيعمل شقاوة. فأنا I used in Egypt, what do? You pinch his ears, and I did that not thinking I was doing something major, and the parents had a heart attack because I was doing that. So there are cultural issues here. You know, pinching the cheeks, ملظلظ الولد وأمور وحلو, okay? We're pinching the ears. Here are a big issue. So if the child is not accepting it, feels insulted, uncomfortable, I need to read him or her. So the parent who is doing that, please stop. If your husband is doing that and he's not here, tell him, you know, you listen to 4 speakers specialize in Christian counseling, and one of them said that. So we pray for God to change his heart. Yeah, another issue, and then we'll give the microphone. The questions, I think we need 2 days to finish. So we're going to start into 15 minutes. But the question, I lost the question. The question is about, yes, here. Maybe next time, we need a specific session about teenagers. It's very interesting for the parents. And
as always.
And sexuality in general. That's right. How do you deal with the teenager biological changes and mood changes, mood swings? 3 things. Number 1, prepare them. I need my boy, when he is 10, to talk with him about the biological changes that are happening or will happen. Girl is now mature, developed sexually at 9. We see that in the older times, 9 was something abnormal. But because of many environmental factors, Dr. Salama is a pediatrician, he sees that every day. You know, the budding in the chest, and maybe the menstruation starts earlier than our era. Our era, 12 to 13 was the normal. So number 1, prepare them. For the boy, I tell him he will get some wet dreams he will get an erection, and he will start to get attracted to the opposite sex. For the girl, there are biological changes in her chest and maybe the period, and this is biological facts, medical facts, nothing is wrong with this. Number two, I put it in a positive terminology, meaning this is God's announcement that Mikey, you are leaving childhood, now you're becoming a man like daddy. Very soon you will get taller than daddy, you will develop muscles, you will get mustache here, you will start to shave, your hair will come in the face, and the girl, she's becoming like mama. So it is not something we are uncomfortable with. Actually, we are uncomfortable if it doesn't happen. Then we need to see a doctor, endocrinologist, and we'll see the hormonal level and the investigation and so on. Number three, the mood changes is part of the normal teenage period. They call it the yo-yo. The yo-yo effect, the mood swings. Of course, we're not talking about pathological cases of manic depression. We're not talking about severe mood swings, but part of the adolescence, because the biological changes, the hormonal changes are so fast, they can have a bad day for no apparent reason. And the following day they are so happy and nothing has changed. What do I do with this? Please, children should stay out. Whoever has a child, Dr. Nabil asked if there are children. At that time there were no children, but they started to come in. We're going to stop in a few minutes. So, the biological...
Extend to 88. Mood changes.
Yeah.
يعني في extended adolescent and the mood.
Well, mood changes, we need to exclude pathological cases. Dr. Nabil is saying some of the mood changes will extend to adulthood, then we'll have a bigger problem. I will just stick to my specialty of child psychiatry, because my specialty stops at the age of 18. If you are 19 years old, don't send me the question. That's adulthood. I'm not specialized in that. Yeah. So the mood changes, we need to buy time. We are parents, we need to look at it as temporary. Okay? We usually hear the example from Dr. Nabil and the other lecturers that the teenage period is like a flight plane going in the air, and sometimes we have turbulence. Okay? And the pilot and the steward, or the mudifa, she comes and she will tell us, okay, you are going into turbulence, put your belt on, it will take 5 minutes and it will pass. If the pilot or the steward panic, and the travelers will see that, they will go crazy. So we know it is temporary, they will settle. We all went through that before.
Thank you. It sounds like many of you didn't attend my presentation in the morning because we started very early. However, I promise you, next time we'll devote much more time to answer all your questions. I have serious questions with me here. Many of them still about sexual relationship between a husband and wife. And we need to answer these questions. But let me tell you something quickly. Sexuality in general is a very complex issue because it's subjected to many circumstances and conditions, like exposure, early life exposures, sex abuse, for example, female circumcision, sex education, perception of sex in your original family, the family of origin, for example. Anything like that, whether you are a male or female, would affect one way or another your sexual behavior in marriage. Thanks to Dr. Nabil, because he set some good rules very clearly today. But still, we have some more questions, like for example, how can a wife help her husband get out of pornography? Let me tell you something. You notice today that the emphasis was about the role of man in general. But let me emphasize a little bit the role of a woman. Because some men may say that we lost interest in having vaginal sex or sexual intercourse. And this can be a responsibility for the wife too, because the wife doesn't do her job to arouse her husband. Arousal is the job of each party to the other. Okay? It's not excuse for a man to resort to something like anal sex, for example. Still, we believe that this is the natural plan of God. Vaginal sex. But do your job. And like the example that I gave during my presentation about those boys and girls who were abused when they were children, how did that affect their lives when they got married? Counseling is extremely important. Treatment, therapy. Okay? And so on. So, no shame when it comes to sexuality in a marital relationship. There is no shame. I do my best to improve my functioning, to help my spouse function, to get rid of all these evil things like pornography and stuff. Some other factor which is very important is coming here in a question. How do I handle seeing my toddler playing with his genitals or rubbing himself on the floor? Usually, the usual response or the common response of a parent usually is the mother. عيب يا حبيبي حرام ربنا هيوديك النار. God shall just throw you in hell. And you don't know, especially when you say that at such a young age 2 and 3 and 4. Number one, this is not going to work. I have been repeatedly visiting many cities here in the States, and I still hear the same complaints sometimes from the same mothers. Even when, after all my advices, stop doing that. You are just making the issue fixated in the boy's son. When you punish the boy, you know the common saying, كل ممنوع إيه مرغوب. Exactly, that's what. I mean, I had a parent who said, when I asked my child to go right, I asked him to go left, then he would go right. So please, educate yourself as a parent. Don't touch these issues, because many of them, our children do that innocently. But you know what you do? When you just focus on the guilt and the shame, you're shaming the guy, the young boy, you are encouraging the young boy to continue masturbating and keeping the habit. So please, please, try to avoid any shaming or induction of guilt into a child's life, especially when they are so innocent. There's no need for that. It's just look the other way. Ignore that. The child will stop doing that. It's a stage in life, and so on. Okay? Please feel free to email me at any time. I have many written answers ready for you for your questions, but the time didn't help me to answer all these questions during my lecture. Thank you so much.
Now we're going to stop. I just want to